Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today it's going to be a bit of a, I don't want to say a rant. The word rant seems to imply a certain degree of anger, and I don't feel angry about this. But today, I'm just going to blether about something that, kind of annoys me, if I'm being completely honest. What it comes down to is basically this. There is a lot of mindless encouragement with respect to language learning in the modern world. I suppose I'm talking mainly about YouTube, but there's a lot of mindless encouragement, and I find it quite perplexing. I can think of people that I have known personally whose lives would have been better and more rewarding and more satisfying if they had been quite vociferously discouraged from learning or trying to learn languages that they tried to learn. There are always opportunity costs in life. If you do X, you can't do Y. If you do Y, you can't do Z. You might say, well, why can't I do X and Y? Okay, yeah, I get it. There are only so many hours in the day. We only have so much energy available, and we only have so much money available. True? What that means is that when we commit an hour of our time to X, we can't commit that hour to Y. Yeah, I don't want to get into arguments with utopian people who say, oh, why can't I do X, Y, and Z? Okay, let's grow up and acknowledge that these things are not possible, right? Okay. Bearing in mind that we're all limited in what we can do, what we can attempt, what we can try in life, doesn't it make sense not to encourage people to do things that they're going to crash and burn with? Why not try and help people have realistic ideas as to what's achievable and what's not in life? I have known people, I mentioned this a moment ago, I have known people who have made a substantial investment of time and effort, and sometimes money, in learning or trying to learn Japanese, and eventually they have crashed and burned. I know people who have quit their jobs, gone to university, spent thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of pounds, especially if you bear in mind the opportunity costs of not working. I've known people who've taken on all those costs to try and learn Japanese on the basis of completely false and unrealistic ideas they had about how accessible that would be to them and what sort of career they might have on the other side of it. And it breaks my heart sometimes when I think about some of these people. And the damage is a strong word. Let's say, it breaks my heart when I think of the negative and pernicious effects that language learning would have extended on their lives. It is not moral to encourage people to do things that they almost certainly cannot do, or even certainly cannot do, under normal circumstances. There may be situations in which encouraging people to do things that they can't do is actually good for them. But not easy to think of any off the top of my head. And language learning certainly isn't one of them. I do notice a very strong tendency amongst people who talk about language learning online to say, we can all learn a language. We did it as a child. If we did it as a child, we must be able to do it. What is this argument? When I was born, I must have been about a foot tall, right? How tall is a newborn baby? Don't know. Let's say a foot. Now I'm nearly 6 feet. So my size increased by a factor of 6 throughout childhood. Does that mean that I can now grow to 36 feet? Can I increase my height by a factor of 6 again because I did it as a child? I don't think so. There's so much nonsense spouted by people online about how anyone can learn language. And it's just patently false. I've spent years and years and years and years studying languages, being around other people who are studying languages, teaching languages, observing other people learning languages. And the idea that anyone can do it and be good at it is utter rubbish. People are radically different in terms of the raw ability they have to learn foreign languages. They're radically different in terms of their temperaments, and they're also radically different in terms of the resources they have available, time, energy. When you take all of that into account, it is no surprise that some people can learn alien languages to an advanced level, and that other people will absolutely crash and burn even with with languages that are relatively similar to their own, in our case, Romance languages, Germanic languages. There's a huge amount of variation in terms of our ability to learn foreign languages, and it is immoral to say flat out to a bunch of strangers on the internet who you've never met, who you're not familiar with, that they can do it if they really try. There are people who say that about Japanese. I don't want to name any names here. If I choose to pick fights with people, I'll pick fights in dedicated videos and not when I'm talking off the cuff like this. But there are people who say, yes, you can learn Japanese. And not just learn it, but learn it to fluency. Yes, you can do it. Learning Japanese to fluency is so sickeningly difficult that, numerically speaking, it would be closer to the truth to say flat out as a one-size-fits-all answer, no, you cannot learn Japanese, period. Next question. You do not do people favors by feeding them a plate of BS, to use the American expression that I don't actually like, about what they can do and what they can't do. And when people engage in this sort of nonsense talk as part of their own job, business efforts, online teaching efforts, I think that that is truly, seriously immoral. I teach languages. I teach Japanese. I would also teach Russian if I could find a convenient way of doing it. One day, maybe I'll even teach Mandarin Chinese if I can make much more progress with it. But I would never say to people, yes, you can learn Japanese. Come and study with me. I have the secret magic recipe or formula or whatever. It's nonsense. I don't have any secret magic recipe. You probably can't learn it. And I've always been honest. I've always been honest. Working on italki, teaching Japanese, when people say, Sam, what sort of progress can I expect? 6 months from now, where would I be with Japanese if I did 2 hours of study a day? I say, you won't be able to speak it, and you won't be able to understand what people say to you, and you won't be able to have a conversation. I'm honest. I'm honest to a fault. Language learning is incredibly hard. And I do not like this sort of rubbishy, mindless, lowest common denominator, motivational speaking guff that you encounter so frequently on the internet. It's really hard to learn languages well. And if the language you want to learn is something like Japanese, Chinese, Arabic, here, I never studied Arabic, but it's pretty alien, right? Korean, maybe even Russian. Because Russian's out there for a European language, I promise you. If the language you want to learn is a language like that, then you've got to understand that learning it well is going to take a massive chunk out of what you can do in your life, intellectually speaking. My Russian's pretty good these days. I'd say I'm at a pretty strong C1 level. I've probably spent about 6,500 hours working on my Russian. If you work 40 hours a week for 50 weeks a year, then you work 2,000 hours a year. So I've put 3.25 working years into my Russian. That is what it has taken out of me. It's been really, really, really hard. And I do pretty well with languages. Many people wouldn't do that well with it. That is what you're talking about. So on this channel, you will never encounter any of that sort of motivational speaking. If anything, you'll encounter the opposite. I would not like to encourage people to learn languages. I would like to discourage people from learning languages, not because I think it's a bad idea, but because there's so much nonsense out there. You can do it, all that sort of just lying nonsense out there, that I feel the need to push back against that a little bit. If you're thinking of learning a language, hey, maybe it's a good idea. I don't know you. I don't know who you are. I'm just some guy sitting in front of a camera, right? But you should not allow yourself to get sucked into this ridiculous hype about how I learned 10 languages in 18 months and how I became a famous polyglot on you. It's just a load of utter nonsense. You are either speaking to people who are radically, radically naive and ignorant about what it takes to get good at foreign languages, or you're talking to people who are deliberately misleading you for clicks and views and giggles, the Americans like to say, don't they? But you should not get sucked up into that. You should not allow yourself, if possible, to get into a situation in which you've sunk a couple of thousand hours into learning a language and are still really bad at it. Because then you have to make a hard decision. I can quit and basically lose everything, lose the meager amount that I learned, or I can keep going and maybe end up in an even worse and more frustrating situation a year from now. That is a difficult situation to be in, and I do not want people to end up in that situation. So I would like to discourage people, and I would like to encourage people to compare themselves to the people around them when it comes to learning languages. Don't compare yourself to the frauds and charlatans on YouTube who know 3 phrases in 17 different languages. Do not compare yourself to those people. You don't have a way of making any true, reliable comparison with those people. You don't have any way of figuring out how good they really are at the languages in question. Find real people in the real world and compare yourself to them and see if you are progressing at a respectable rate. And if you're not, then ask yourself whether language learning has any value to you purely as a hobby, even if you don't make any real progress. Because that's not a contemptible thing. Do a bit of language learning to have something to do, fine, we've got no problem with it. But if other people seem to be progressing much more rapidly than you, and you're capable of making real, useful comparisons between them and yourself, then maybe it's time to find something else to do. There are lots of things you can do in this world, lots of things you can do in this world. You know, learn to make pottery, learn to ride horses, learn to make the world's best or cook the world's best steak. I mean, you know, take up painting, do some exercise. There's so many other things you can do. Language learning, a great pursuit for some people and a very poor pursuit for many other people. So if you feel discouraged by this video, I'd say maybe it was a good thing then that I made it. Maybe you need a bit of discouragement now and again. It's just asinine to think that encouragement is always a good thing. Anyway, there you go. Miserable and grumpy as ever. But that is all I wanted to say today. So thanks very much for listening, if you were listening. And I will see you next time. Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye.